You can tell a lot about a person by how confident they look holding a clipboard at 6 in the morning. That thought hit me the second I saw the bright red HOA violation sticker slapped across the windshield of my patrol boat. The paper snapped violently in the ocean wind, while the aluminum flagpole outside my neighbor's house clanged over and over in the darkness like somebody tapping a steel hammer against a pipe. It was 5:12 a.m. according to the green digits glowing on my kitchen microwave when I stepped outside barefoot holding a mug of black coffee, still half asleep, still hearing the low hum of diesel engines in my head from the night before. The air smelled like salt water, wet rope and fresh rain drifting in from the harbor 2 miles east of our neighborhood. My driveway lights reflected off the dull gray hull sitting on its trailer beside my garage, and for a second I honestly thought somebody had vandalized it. Then I saw the HOA logo. Unauthorized vehicle. Immediate tow authorized. Printed in giant capital letters across the sticker. I just stood there staring at it while wind pushed against my hoodie. The boat itself looked intimidating enough to make most people keep their distance. 32 feet long. Matte navy gray paint. Heavy rub rails. Reinforced bow. Even with the old patrol lights removed, it still carried the shape of something that belonged near restricted water, not parked inside a waterfront HOA community full of retirees and luxury golf carts. Most of the neighbors avoided asking questions about it. But Linda Mercer never avoided anything. I heard her before I saw her. High heels clicking against pavement. Fast. Sharp. Deliberate. Then she appeared at the edge of my driveway wearing a white HOA windbreaker zipped all the way to her throat like she was reporting for military duty herself. Her blonde hair barely moved in the wind thanks to enough hairspray to survive a hurricane. She crossed her arms and looked at the sticker like an artist admiring a signature on a painting. "Good," she said. "You finally saw it." I took another sip of coffee without answering. Linda glanced toward the boat again. "I gave you 3 notices already, Ethan. This neighborhood is not a storage yard." The thing was, she hadn't given me 3 notices. She'd left one folded paper under my mailbox 3 days ago, while I was out running maintenance checks at the marina. But Linda liked rewriting history whenever she had an audience, even if the audience was just seagulls and security cameras. I looked down at the sticker again, then at the trailer wheel where somebody had wrapped an orange tow prep tag around the axle. That part actually made me pause. Most HOA presidents didn't know how towing authorization worked. Linda apparently thought she did. "You tagged the boat?" I asked calmly. "Correction," she said. "I authorized enforcement." Somewhere down the street, a dog started barking. The ocean wind picked up harder, rattling the canvas covers tied down near the stern. Linda smiled like she was waiting for me to lose my temper. That was probably how most of these encounters went for her. Push somebody hard enough until they explode, then act like the victim afterward. But I didn't feel angry. Not yet. Mostly I felt curious. Because mounted low near the rear section of the hull, barely visible beneath the salt stains and faded paint, sat a small black federal inventory plate most civilians would never recognize. And judging by the way Linda kept standing there smiling with her clipboard tucked under one arm, she definitely hadn't recognized it either. By 6 o'clock the entire street was awake, and that was exactly how Linda Mercer liked it. Some people drink coffee for energy. Linda used attention. I watched her standing beside the neighborhood fountain with her phone held chest high, recording everything for the Seabrook Harbor Estates community page like she was covering breaking news. The morning fog still floated low over the sidewalks, and every few seconds the rotating lighthouse beacon from the marina swept faint white light across the windows of the houses lining our street. Somebody nearby started a leaf blower. Another garage door rolled open. Curtains moved. Neighbors always sense drama before sunrise in our community. "There he is," Linda announced loudly the second I walked back outside carrying my keys. Her voice carried halfway down the block. "The owner of the unauthorized commercial vessel." A few people laughed nervously. I recognized most of them. Retired couples. Boat owners. A dentist who never made eye contact with anybody. The kind of neighborhood where everybody smiled until the HOA sent a warning letter. Linda pivoted her phone toward me. "Mr. Walker has ignored repeated notices regarding this eyesore parked in violation of community standards." I glanced at the camera, then at the growing crowd gathering near the curb. "Morning, Diane," I said calmly to an older woman standing beside her mailbox. Diane gave me a tiny uncomfortable wave without responding. Nobody wanted to end up on Linda's bad side. Last year she fined a widow $300 over a garden flag she called visually distracting. Linda stepped closer to the trailer, heels clicking sharply against concrete. This thing has lowered property values for weeks, she continued. Several residents have complained. Nobody said a word. That was the funny part about HOA politics. Complaints usually meant Linda complaining to herself through 3 different email accounts. The wind shifted harder off the harbor, carrying the smell of low tide and diesel fuel through the street. The gray hull creaked softly against the trailer straps. Linda pointed dramatically toward the faded navy paint. Honestly, it looks like military surplus garbage. I noticed 2 younger guys from the towing company pulling slowly into the street behind her with a white tow truck. One of them leaned out the window studying the boat with visible uncertainty. The other kept checking something on a tablet mounted near the dashboard. Linda waved them forward immediately like a traffic officer directing airplanes on a runway. Perfect timing, she said. We are removing it today. The taller tow operator climbed out first, maybe late 20s, heavy work gloves, chewing gum. He walked toward the rear of the boat while his partner circled near the trailer hitch. Neither of them looked comfortable anymore. You got paperwork? The tall guy asked Linda. She handed him a clipboard instantly. HOA authorization. He skimmed it quickly, then glanced toward the hull again. This thing active? He asked me quietly. Define active, I answered. Linda immediately cut in before he could say another word. It is abandoned recreational equipment in violation of Section 8.4 of Community Appearance Standards. The taller operator crouched beside the rear quarter panel near the faded inventory plate. I watched his expression change almost immediately. His chewing stopped. Hey, he called toward his partner. Come look at this. The second worker walked over fast. Both of them stared at the black plate mounted low near the hull, partly hidden beneath dried salt residue and chipped paint. One of them muttered something under his breath I could not hear clearly. Linda folded her arms impatiently. Gentlemen, are we doing this or not? Neither of them answered right away. The taller worker slowly stood back up and looked directly at me this time instead of Linda. Sir, he said carefully, why does this boat still have a federal inventory marker on it? The entire street went quiet after he asked that question. Even the leaf blower down the block suddenly stopped like somebody had pulled the cord out of the wall. The tall tow operator kept staring at the black inventory plate mounted near the stern while his partner slowly lowered the towing chain from his shoulder. Linda laughed awkwardly and waved one hand dismissively like the whole thing was ridiculous. Because he bought some fake military toy online, she said loudly. Can we please stop pretending this is some classified submarine? A couple neighbors chuckled nervously, but nobody sounded confident anymore. The taller operator did not laugh. He stepped closer to the hull and rubbed salt residue away from the plate with his thumb. Beneath the grime, faded silver lettering became visible under the morning light. His expression tightened immediately. No, he muttered quietly. This is real. Linda rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh my God, are you serious? She turned her phone camera toward me again. Ladies and gentlemen of Seabrook Harbor Estates, apparently our neighborhood junk pile is now a national security issue. More nervous laughter. But the 2 tow workers still were not moving. The shorter guy looked directly at me. Sir, are you active duty? He asked carefully. Reserve maintenance contractor, I answered. Linda instantly cut me off before I could say anything else. He means he cleans boats, she snapped. Can we tow this thing now or not? The taller operator stood up slowly. Ma'am, I need dispatch verification before we touch this trailer. Linda stared at him in disbelief. Excuse me. Federal inventory markers changed the process. This is an HOA community, Linda shot back. I authorized removal. The guy gave an uncomfortable shrug. HOA authorization does not override federal registration. The wind whipped harder through the street, rattling palm trees lining the sidewalks. Somewhere out near the harbor, a foghorn echoed low and deep across the water. I watched Linda's smile start slipping around the edges for the first time all morning. Not panic yet, just irritation. The kind people get when reality refuses to cooperate with their authority. She stepped directly in front of the tow truck driver and lowered her voice, but everybody could still hear her. "Listen carefully," she said. "This man has ignored community standards for weeks. If your company refuses service, I will personally recommend we stop using your towing contract entirely." That landed exactly how she intended. The shorter operator looked nervous immediately. Local towing companies lived off HOA contracts around coastal neighborhoods like ours. Linda knew it too. The taller driver glanced between her and me, stuck in the middle of something he clearly wanted no part of. Then his eyes drifted back toward the boat again, specifically toward the faded mounting brackets where patrol lights used to sit. Tow hooks reinforced with military welds. Heavy communications housing near the cabin roof. Small details civilians ignored. Details certain people recognized instantly. "How long has this thing been here?" he asked me. "About 11 days, I said. "Temporary hold during transfer maintenance." Linda threw both hands into the air. "There. You heard him. Temporary. Meaning not permanent. Meaning violation." She looked around proudly at the neighbors gathering near the sidewalks like she was winning a courtroom case. "Honestly, I do not understand why people move into luxury communities if they want to live next to industrial equipment." Diane shifted uncomfortably near her mailbox again. A few neighbors quietly started backing away toward their houses. Nobody wanted to be standing too close anymore. The taller tow operator finally exhaled hard and pulled his phone from his pocket. "I need to make a call before we proceed," he said. Linda folded her arms. "Fine. Do whatever paperwork fantasy makes you feel safe." He walked several feet away toward the curb while speaking quietly into his headset. I could not hear the conversation clearly over the wind, but I caught 3 words that made me glance toward the harbor immediately. Federal custody confirmation. And that was the exact moment I realized this morning was about to get a lot more complicated for Linda Mercer. The mood on our street changed after that phone call. You could actually feel it happen. One minute it was neighborhood gossip in HOA theater. The next, people started lowering their voices like they had accidentally wandered into something official. The tall tow operator kept pacing slowly near the curb with his headset pressed against one ear, while his partner stayed beside the truck pretending to check straps that did not need checking. Linda hated losing control of a situation, and I could see it all over her face now. Her smile looked tighter, her movements sharper. She kept glancing around at the neighbors like she needed their attention to stay on her side. "This is unbelievable," she said loudly. "We are wasting everybody's morning because of a parking violation." She pointed toward my boat again. "Look at it. It has not moved in days." 11, I said calmly. Linda swung toward me immediately. "Exactly. Thank you." The tall operator finally walked back over holding his phone low against his chest. "Dispatch says we should not tow until federal registration gets verified." Linda stared at him like he had personally insulted her. "You already have authorization." "From the HOA," he replied carefully. "Not from the registry office." Linda gave a dry laugh. "Registry office? Are we towing a yacht or launching missiles?" A few neighbors chuckled again, but weaker this time. Nobody really knew where this was going anymore. The shorter tow operator stepped closer to the hull and pointed toward a faded stencil near the cabin door. "That serial formatting is military," he said quietly to his partner. "I saw the same kind on Coast Guard interceptors down in Wilmington." Linda immediately stepped between them and the boat like she was reclaiming territory. "Enough with the drama," she snapped. "Hook it up." Neither man moved. Wind pushed harder through the palms lining the street, carrying loose sand across the pavement in soft scraping waves. Somewhere out near the marina, gulls started screaming over the water. I set my coffee mug down on the trailer fender and pulled my phone from my pocket. Linda noticed instantly. "Oh good," she said sarcastically. "Now we get the fake military emergency call." I ignored her completely and walked several feet toward the edge of my driveway where I could see the harbor through the houses. Gray water. Dock lights. Morning fog still hanging low over the slips. The call connected after one ring. "Walker," I said simply. A pause. "Yeah." Another pause while I watched the tow operators pretending not to listen. They touched the vessel. Silence on my end while the person speaking asked a question. No damage yet, I answered. But towing authorization was issued. That got everybody's attention. Even Linda stopped talking for a second. I glanced back toward the boat, then toward the red HOA sticker still flapping violently against the windshield in the wind. Understood, I said calmly. I will remain on site. Then I hung up. Linda folded her arms immediately. Very dramatic. I slipped my phone back into my pocket. You should probably cancel the tow. She laughed right in my face. Absolutely not. Linda, the tall operator interrupted carefully, I really think we should pause until verification clears. No, she snapped. What I think is happening is this man found some old government junk at auction and now everybody is terrified because he knows military vocabulary. She pointed directly at the boat again. Hook. Up. The shorter operator hesitated before finally grabbing the towing chain from the truck bed. Metal links rattled loudly through the quiet street. Several neighbors immediately stepped farther back onto their lawns. I watched the younger guy approach the trailer hitch slowly, clearly uncomfortable now. Then, just as he crouched beside the front axle, every phone on the tow crew suddenly chimed at the exact same time. Both operators froze. The taller one looked down at his screen first. His face lost all color almost instantly. Oh, he whispered under his breath. That is not good. The taller tow operator kept staring at his phone like he wanted the message to disappear if he blinked hard enough. His partner walked over immediately. What? He whispered. The taller guy turned the screen toward him for half a second, and whatever he saw drained the confidence right out of his face too. Linda noticed instantly. What now? She demanded. Neither of them answered her. The shorter operator slowly lowered the towing chain onto the pavement, and the metal links hit concrete with a loud clatter that echoed through the entire street. Every neighbor nearby went silent again. Even the gulls circling above the harbor seemed quieter now. Finally, the taller operator looked up at me. Sir, he said carefully, dispatch says this vessel is listed under temporary federal maintenance custody. Linda gave an exaggerated laugh that sounded completely forced this time. Temporary custody? It is sitting in a driveway beside hydrangeas. Ma'am, he replied nervously, they also told us not to touch it. The wind snapped the red violation sticker violently against the windshield again. I watched Linda's eyes flick toward it for a brief second before she straightened her posture and forced another smile. This is ridiculous, she said loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. We are allowing somebody to intimidate an entire community with fake government jargon. She pointed directly at me again like a prosecutor in court. Do you know how many people pretend to be military online? Nobody responded. Diane quietly disappeared back inside her house. Two other neighbors started walking away down the sidewalk, pretending they suddenly had somewhere important to be. Nobody wanted to stay near the center of this anymore. The taller tow operator cleared his throat awkwardly. There is more. Linda spun toward him immediately. What more? He hesitated before answering. Dispatch contacted somebody connected to the registration. I could almost hear the gears turning in Linda's head as she tried to decide whether she still controlled this situation. And, she snapped. The operator swallowed hard. And they asked for the exact address. That landed differently. You could feel it. The whole atmosphere shifted again like pressure dropping before a storm. Linda crossed her arms tighter. Good, she said. Maybe they can explain to him how private communities work. I glanced toward the harbor road at the far end of the neighborhood. Still empty. Still quiet. But not for long. The shorter tow operator stepped away from the trailer completely now. I am not hooking this up, he said flatly. Linda stared at him in disbelief. Excuse me. Not without clearance. You work for us. No, ma'am, he answered carefully. We work for the towing company. And the towing company just told us to stop. Linda's face flushed bright red around the edges. This community pays your contracts. And federal penalties could bankrupt the company. The taller operator added quickly. Linda opened her mouth to argue again when a low engine sound rolled through the neighborhood from somewhere beyond the entrance gate. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just heavy. Controlled. Every head on the street turned toward the sound automatically. A few seconds later, Two black sport utility vehicles slowly entered Seabrook Harbor Estates one behind the other. No emergency lights. No sirens. Dark-tinted windows. Government plates. They moved calmly past the fountain and clubhouse at maybe 10 miles per hour, tires humming softly against the brick-lined roadway. Nobody spoke. The first vehicle stopped directly in front of my driveway. The second parked behind it, with perfect spacing like they had rehearsed it 100 times before. Then the engines shut off. Silence settled over the street except for the wind and the distant cry of seabirds near the marina. The driver door opened first. A man stepped out wearing dark navy cargo pants and a black windbreaker with small gold lettering over the chest. Another officer exited the second vehicle carrying a tablet case tucked beneath one arm. Calm faces. Professional movements. No wasted motion anywhere. The taller tow operator immediately took 2 full steps backward away from the trailer. Linda still tried holding on to her confidence, but I noticed her adjusting her posture now, smoothing her jacket nervously, forcing a smile that looked weaker by the second. One of the officers glanced briefly at the patrol boat, then at the red HOA violation sticker still attached to the windshield. After that, he looked directly at Linda Mercer and asked the single question that finally wiped the expression off her face completely. Who authorized contact with the vessel? For the first time all morning, Linda Mercer did not answer immediately. She just stood there blinking at the officer like her brain needed an extra second to process the question. The wind pulled loose strands of hair across her face while the red HOA sticker kept slapping lightly against the windshield behind her. One of the officers waited calmly beside the black sport utility vehicle with his hands folded behind his back, while the other opened the tablet case and tapped through several screens without saying a word. No raised voices. No drama. Somehow that made the whole thing feel even more serious. Linda finally forced a smile. "I did," she answered. "I am the acting president of Seabrook Harbor Estates." The first officer nodded once. "Name?" "Linda Mercer." "Did you authorize attempted towing procedures?" "I authorized a community standards enforcement action," she corrected quickly. "The vessel violated neighborhood policy." The officer glanced toward the patrol boat for half a second before looking back at her. "Did you authorize physical contact with the vessel?" Linda hesitated again. "Well, yes. Technically." The officer beside the tablet spoke for the first time. "Contact was made with restricted maintenance property under temporary federal custody status at 0642 hours. Hearing it phrased that way changed the mood instantly. It no longer sounded like a neighborhood disagreement. It sounded official, cold, administrative, the kind of language that came with paperwork nobody wanted attached to their name. Linda laughed nervously. "This is getting blown way out of proportion." Neither officer reacted. The taller tow operator quietly stepped farther away from the trailer again while his partner climbed fully back into the tow truck cab without saying anything. "Smart move." The first officer looked toward me. "Mr. Walker, has the vessel sustained any damage?" "No, sir," I answered. "Tow preparation only." He nodded once. "Understood." Linda immediately pointed at me. "See? No damage. So this entire thing is unnecessary." The officer turned back toward her calmly. "Ma'am, federal registry restrictions do not require damage to trigger response review." The word review visibly unsettled her. "Response review?" she repeated. "You make it sound like I committed a crime." "We are determining whether unauthorized interference occurred," the officer replied evenly. Behind us, several neighbors had quietly gathered near the sidewalks again. But now nobody looked entertained anymore. People looked uncomfortable, curious, careful. A few phones were recording openly. Linda noticed that too. Her posture changed immediately. Softer voice. Concerned expression. Sudden victim mode. "I was only trying to protect property values," she said. This man never explained what this thing actually was. I almost smiled at that. She had spent the last hour interrupting everybody who tried. The second officer glanced toward the windshield. "Who placed the violation notice?" Linda slowly raised one hand. "I did." "Who authorized towing?" "I did." "Who contacted the towing company?" "I did." Every answer sounded smaller than the one before it. The officer entered notes into the tablet silently while gulls cried overhead near the marina. Somewhere farther down the street, a garage door opened halfway before immediately closing again, once the homeowner spotted the federal vehicles. The first officer walked slowly around the patrol boat inspecting the trailer, the inventory plate, and the red tow prep tag hanging from the axle. He stopped near the stern and ran one finger across the faded registration stencil beneath the salt residue. Then he looked directly at Linda again. "Ma'am, were you aware this vessel remains under restricted transfer maintenance classification?" Linda swallowed hard. "No. Did you verify registration before authorizing removal? The HOA does not normally need federal approval for parking enforcement." "That was not my question." Complete silence settled across the street. Even Linda seemed to realize she had finally lost control of the conversation. She looked around at the neighbors searching for support, but nobody stepped in. Nobody said a word. The only sound came from the ocean wind rattling the palm trees and the soft ticking noise of the patrol boat cooling in the morning air while two federal officers documented everything she had done. Linda kept trying to recover control of the situation, but every sentence she spoke only made things worse. You could see it happening in real time. The confidence she walked onto my driveway with that morning was disappearing piece by piece under the quiet pressure of official questions she could not talk her way around. The officer with the tablet continued documenting details calmly, while the other one inspected the patrol boat without touching anything else. "For clarification," the tablet officer said, "did you receive any notice that the vessel belonged to federal maintenance transfer status before authorizing removal?" Linda crossed her arms again. Nobody explained that clearly. I almost answered, but there was no need. The taller tow operator spoke first. "Actually, ma'am, I brought up the inventory plate before hookup." Linda shot him a glare sharp enough to cut rope. "You said it might be military." "I said we should stop." The shorter operator nodded immediately from inside the tow truck cab. "We both did." The officer entered another note into the tablet. Tap, tap, tap. Every sound suddenly felt louder in the morning silence. Palm leaves rattling overhead. Dock chains clinking faintly from the harbor. The soft electronic chirp every time another note got entered into federal records. Linda looked around at the neighbors again, searching for somebody willing to support her version of events. Nobody moved. Then the worst possible thing happened for her. Mrs. Patterson from 3 houses down stepped slowly off her porch holding her phone in both hands. "Actually," she said hesitantly, "Linda streamed most of this live in the community group." Linda's entire body stiffened. "Carol, stay out of this." But Mrs. Patterson kept talking anyway. "You called the boat military garbage on camera." The officer holding the tablet finally looked up. "There is a recording?" Linda forced another nervous laugh. "People record everything these days." "That does not mean anything." Mrs. Patterson lowered her phone slightly. "You also said you wanted the boat gone before federal people noticed it." The silence afterward felt enormous. Linda whipped around so fast her clipboard nearly slipped from under her arm. "That is not what I meant." The tablet officer spoke calmly. "Ma'am, we will need a copy of that recording." Linda immediately pointed toward me again like she was drowning and needed someone else underwater beside her. This entire thing started because he parked an aggressive-looking military vessel in a residential neighborhood. The vessel was lawfully stationed under temporary transfer authorization, the officer replied evenly. That authorization was already filed with Harbor Administration. Linda blinked rapidly. "Harbor Administration?" "Yes, ma'am." The officer tapped the side of the tablet screen. "Including HOA access notification sent 4 days ago." That changed everything. Completely. Even I had not known that part. Linda's expression froze for half a second before she recovered with visible effort. "I never saw any notice." The officer rotated the tablet slightly toward her. "Notification receipt shows it was opened from your board email account at 8:14 p.m. on Monday." The taller tow operator slowly muttered, "Oh man," under his breath. A few neighbors exchanged uncomfortable looks. Suddenly this was not about misunderstanding rules anymore. Now it looked intentional. Linda realized it too. "I receive hundreds of emails," she said quickly. "I cannot monitor every attachment." The officer nodded once like he had heard excuses 1,000 times before. "Understood." but the way he said it made it clear he did not believe her at all. Another officer stepped out from the second vehicle carrying a slim black folder. He handed it quietly to the first officer before glancing toward me. "Transfer office confirmed vessel status," he said. "Chain of custody remains active until Friday." Linda's face lost even more color. The first officer opened the folder briefly, then closed it again. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "because this incident involved attempted unauthorized removal of federally tracked property after prior notification was acknowledged, we will need your HOA documentation, towing authorization records, and any related communications preserved immediately." Nobody on that street would admit it later, but that was the exact moment everybody realized Linda Mercer was no longer the person in charge. By that evening, Seabrook Harbor Estates looked completely different. The same neighborhood that usually obsessed over lawn stripes and mailbox paint codes now felt tense and strangely quiet, like everybody was waiting for another black government vehicle to roll through the entrance gate. The emergency HOA meeting started at 7:30 sharp, inside the waterfront clubhouse overlooking the marina. Normally those meetings attracted maybe 12 bored retirees and one angry homeowner complaining about parking. That night the room was packed shoulder to shoulder. Folding chairs scraped across tile floors. Ceiling fans spun lazily overhead while sunset light reflected orange across the harbor outside the giant windows. I stayed near the back wall beside the coffee station, hands in my jacket pockets, listening more than talking. Linda sat at the front board table beneath the framed community charter with a forced smile stretched across her face so tightly it looked painful. But for the first time since I moved into that neighborhood, nobody seemed intimidated by her anymore. Residents were whispering openly now, comparing stories, questioning things they had ignored for years. Mrs. Patterson sat in the front row holding printed screenshots from the community livestream Linda had deleted that afternoon. Apparently several neighbors recorded copies before it disappeared. Smart people. One of the board members, a gray-haired accountant named Richard Holloway, cleared his throat nervously into the microphone. Tonight's meeting concerns recent events involving unauthorized enforcement procedures. Nobody missed the careful wording. Not even Linda. She immediately leaned toward the microphone. There has been a misunderstanding involving a resident vehicle classification. Federal officers visited the neighborhood. Somebody interrupted from the crowd. That is not a misunderstanding. More voices followed instantly. You said the boat was abandoned. You threatened towing before verification. You told everybody he was lying. Linda tried regaining control by raising her voice over the room. I acted in the best interest of property values. But that argument sounded weak now. Too rehearsed. Too familiar. The atmosphere had changed. People were no longer listening to her authority. They were measuring her credibility. Richard adjusted his glasses nervously while flipping through a folder of printed emails. Linda, he said carefully, did Harbor Administration send a notification about the vessel on Monday? Silence. Linda looked toward him slowly. I receive hundreds of emails. Richard held up the printed notice for the room to see. Because according to the timestamp, your account opened this attachment for 6 minutes. A low murmur spread across the clubhouse immediately. Linda's face tightened. I may have skimmed it. You told residents no notice existed, another board member said quietly. Mrs. Patterson stood up holding her phone. I also have the live stream recording where she says she wanted the boat removed before federal authorities noticed. That landed like a brick in water. Heavy. Final. Linda looked around the room searching desperately for support, but nobody jumped in this time. Even the people who used to follow her around during neighborhood inspections avoided eye contact now. Richard exhaled slowly and removed his reading glasses. Federal officers requested all towing communications, violation records, and board correspondence preserved immediately. Linda straightened in her chair. You are seriously turning against me over one parking issue? This stopped being a parking issue when federal custody status got involved, Richard replied. Another resident stood near the back. What else has she hidden? More voices followed instantly after that. Stories poured out from every corner of the room. Fines issued without votes. Selective enforcement. Threats against homeowners trying to sell property. complaints mysteriously disappearing unless residents supported Linda politically. The meeting spiraled fast. Not chaotic, just honest for the first time in years. Linda kept trying to interrupt, but every attempt only brought out another story, another complaint, another screenshot, another witness. Then Richard finally slid a resignation form across the board table toward her. Complete silence filled the clubhouse. Outside the giant marina windows, harbor lights shimmered against the dark water while boat masts swayed slowly in the wind. Linda stared at the paper for several seconds without touching it. For the first time since sunrise, she looked genuinely small. 3 mornings later, the patrol boat finally left my driveway. The sun had barely started climbing over the Atlantic when I walked down toward the marina with a thermos of coffee warming my hands against the cold ocean wind. The docks creaked softly beneath my boots while ropes knocked rhythmically against aluminum masts all around the harbor. Seabrook Harbor Estates was quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet. This felt different. Cleaner somehow. Like a storm had finally passed through after sitting over the neighborhood for years. The patrol boat rested low in the water beside Pier 7, gray hull reflecting streaks of orange sunrise light across the marina. A maintenance crew moved calmly around it, checking lines and equipment while diesel engines idled with that deep mechanical hum you could feel in your chest more than hear with your ears. Nobody rushed. Nobody shouted. Everything moved with the same calm professionalism that had completely destroyed Linda Mercer's authority without ever raising a voice. I stood near the edge of the dock watching gulls circle overhead while harbor fog drifted slowly across the slips. One of the shore patrol officers from earlier that week walked over holding a clipboard beneath one arm. "Transfer clears at 0700, he said. "You heading out with them?" "Just to Norfolk," I answered. "Final maintenance sign off." He nodded once. "Quite a neighborhood you got there." I laughed quietly into my coffee cup. "It used to be." The officer glanced back toward the waterfront homes lining the shore beyond the marina. From that angle you could see Linda's house sitting behind a row of trimmed hedges facing the water. Her curtains were open. She was standing there watching the docks from inside the dark kitchen, completely still. No clipboard. No phone. No audience. Just silence. The officer followed my eyes toward the house, then looked back at me carefully. "Word travels fast," he said. "Apparently the HOA board accepted her resignation yesterday afternoon." I nodded slowly. I heard. What I did not say was how strange the neighborhood felt afterward. No more warning letters appearing over trash can lids turned the wrong direction. No more residents whispering nervously during mailbox conversations. No more patrol golf carts circling the streets like a security checkpoint. The whole place finally felt like a neighborhood again instead of a competition nobody volunteered to join. Behind us, one of the maintenance crew released the rear dock lines. Thick rope splashed into the water, while the diesel engines deepened into a steady controlled rumble. The patrol boat eased slowly away from the pier with barely a wake behind it, gray hull cutting through the sunrise reflection like a shadow crossing glass. I stepped aboard just long enough to secure the last equipment case near the cabin entrance before turning back toward shore one final time. Linda was still standing behind that kitchen window. Even from across the marina, I could tell she looked exhausted, smaller somehow, like somebody who finally realized authority only works when people trust you with it. The shore patrol officer extended one hand toward me before I boarded fully. "Take care, Walker." "You too." Then the boat drifted farther out into the harbor channel while morning light spread across the water in long gold streaks. Seabirds wheeled overhead. The lighthouse beacon near the inlet shut off with daylight finally taking over the coastline. I looked back one last time at Seabrook Harbor Estates shrinking slowly behind us and thought about how fast power disappears once people stop being afraid of it. Linda spent years believing control came from violation notices, board meetings, and intimidation. But real authority never needed to announce itself. It arrived quietly, asked simple questions, took notes, and left people alone with the consequences of their own decisions. The ocean teaches you that faster than any neighborhood ever will.